episode of Progress, Potential, and Possibilities, discussions with fascinating people designing a better tomorrow for all of us. I'm your host, Ira Pastor. Welcome, everybody, again to another episode of our show, bringing you another fascinating guest today, helping to create a better tomorrow on many different fronts. Today, we have the honor of being joined by Dr. Jean Accius, who is Senior Vice President at AARP Global Thought Leadership. Dr. Accius leads a team ultimately positioning AARP, which was formerly known as the American Association of Retired Persons, as a global thought leader, helping to identify emerging trends, cultivating new ideas, and forging strategic alliances that ultimately become the foundation for collaborations and different solutions to improve the lives of the global population as it ages. Dr. Accius is a passionate champion and catalyst for changing ultimately how the world sees and values aging. He is internationally recognized thought leader on aging, longevity, equity, health system transformation, and modernizing both the delivery and financing of long-term care. He has a very strong track record in building high-performance teams, managing cross-functional operations, and ultimately developing innovation and actionable solutions so that everyone can live longer, healthier, and more productive lives. He's an extremely sought-after author and speaker. We're very glad to have him. Been quoted and appeared on numerous media outlets around the world, New York Times, Forbes, Time Magazine. In 2020, he helped facilitate several sessions at the 50th World Economic Forum in Davos, engaging over 300 leaders worldwide across various industries and sectors, and ambassadors, many delegates of the United Nations. Dr. Accius is also a member of the National Association of Corporate Directors. He has held a variety of board and advisory positions, including Justice and Aging, the American Society on Aging, Leadership Maryland, and the American University School of Public Affairs Board of Advisors. He is an Executive Leadership Council Fellow, member of the G100 Transformational Leadership Network, holds a bachelor's in hospitality administration, a master's degree in aging studies from Claude Pepper Institute at Florida State University, his Ph.D. in public administration from American University, and is also a graduate of Leadership Maryland's class of 2014, Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health Program and Health Reform, and Stanford Graduate School of Business Corporate Innovation Program. That's a lot to unpack. We're really glad to have him. Yeah. Dr. Jean Accius, thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule to come talk to us for a while.
Well, Ira, I'm so happy to be part of this conversation with you today.
Yeah, it's great to have you. I'm glad we finally got the opportunity to connect. I'd love to start things off like we typically do by handing you the floor for a little bit, just to talk a little bit more about yourself. If you could take us back a little bit further to everything from where you grew up, how you got interested in this space, and why aging, longevity, and sort of health equity became such an important theme in your career.
Well, Ira, again, I just want to first of all start off by extending my gratitude to you and to all of your listeners. I was raised by my grandmother for the first 4 years of my life. And I think that really set the foundation for my interest in ensuring that older adults across the country had access to the tools and the resources that they need in order to live a longer, healthier, more productive life. I had the opportunity to watch my grandmother wake up each and every morning when I was in Haiti, and she put me to school. And she would go out and try to make a living for us, as my dad was actually here in the United States. And when I came to the United States, I also saw quite clearly the opportunity to give back. In fact, my first job was working in a retirement community. So if you could imagine, at the age of 15, 16, working in a dining room, I was working in a CCRC, a private CCRC, and then eventually navigated my way to working for Marriott when Marriott International used to own senior living services. And I knew then that my purpose, my passion, what drove me was really around ensuring that older adults had an opportunity to live that longer, healthier, more productive life. And how do we remove the barriers and obstacles that might actually rob them of the opportunities to live that longer, healthy, and more productive life. So that has been my life story. It actually aligns very well with the work we're doing at AARP. AARP was founded in 1958 by a retired principal who went looking for her retired friend who was a retired teacher and found her friend living in a chicken coop. literally a shack without any walls. And outraged by that, she created AARP. Our founder, Dr. Ethel Percy Andrews, was a visionary, really thinking about what were the policies, what were the programs, what were the structures, what were the resources that we needed to create as a society across sectors to ensure that people had the tools and that people were in the driver's seat of their own destinies. And for more than 60 plus years, AARP has been on the front lines, really advocating and ensuring that people have access to information and the tools so they can live the life that they choose and want to live as they age. So it's been a beautiful journey, both for me personally, but also professionally, because this intersects with my personal and professional passions.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's interesting thinking back. When I was growing up, and I would hear my parents talking. Hey, we're AARP members, and back then it was okay. I understood they had this card, and it sort of gave them some discounts and stuff. And then I turned 50 a couple of years ago, and my card showed up, and sort of the AARP that I'm familiar with, between the online services and the magazines and news that comes, and it's a lot more that it's really evolved a lot over the years. Talk just a little bit, if you would, for sort of especially our non-US audience, a little bit about this, because it's really a huge, you represent 40 plus million folks nowadays in the United States. It is the premier organization that focuses on these issues. Talk a little bit just about the evolution of the organization as you've been there over the years.
Well, I appreciate that question, Ira. If you think about it, our population is not just aging, but living much longer. In the United States, we have over 10,000 people who are turning 65 each and every day. In China, that's about 54,000 people who are turning 60. And somewhere around the world, we have about 200,000 people who are turning 60 each and every day. Coming back to the United States in particular, what we are finding is the fact that, particularly with the latest census numbers, is that the number of older adults outnumber the number of children somewhere around 2032. 2035. And as an organization, we know that the way that people are aging is drastically different from how they've aged in the past. And what we mean by that is the fact that we are seeing a significant increases in longevity, and that people are living nonlinear lives. In some cases, people are living longer and either want to or need to continue working. In some cases, we are seeing people really disrupt the negative stereotypes that comes with aging, whatever you might view or the biases that you might have as relates to what it means to get older. And as an organization, we have been on the front lines wanting to be in our best to be a resource, to be that wise friend and that fierce defender as people navigate life. So much has happened, particularly in the last 18 months with regards to this pandemic, which has turned all of our worlds upside down. And as an organization, we want to be your go-to in terms of solutions, in terms of ideas, in terms of programs, in terms of information, in terms of advocacy, because we know that there's this strong desire across all of our members to contribute, to provide value, to be part of the solution, to roll up their sleeves and contribute in a significant way to ensure that the future is bright and prosperous, resilient for those to come.
Excellent. Excellent. And John, your team at AARP, back in, I think it was 2019, you headed up this really groundbreaking report. It was entitled The Longevity Economy Outlook. And here you outline that, at the time, something around 117 million people over the age of 50, contributing a staggering $8.3 trillion in economic activity. There was an additional something like almost $750 billion in sort of unpaid benefits for caring for family members and so forth. And one of the summaries of this report is that older adults in the United States are not this liability that they're normally portrayed as. They are a huge economic force. Talk a little bit about this report, why you put it together, and some of the core learnings, if you would.
Absolutely. One of the things that we wanted to do, particularly with this report, and if you think about it as individuals and as a society, is the fact that we want to really think about as we age, and aging is a good thing. The ability to live longer is a good thing. The ability to think about what comes with age is a good thing. I typically say that with age comes wisdom and experience. The gene today is, I hope, some might argue, a little bit smarter than the gene 20 years ago. And I think that is important for us to kind of think about, is though different ways in which we are contributing to our societies, the different ways we're contributing to our communities, and the different ways we're contributing to our families, particularly as we age. This report does exactly that. It refutes this idea that older adults are a liability. In fact, what it shows is that older adults are a huge asset. And think about it this way. As you indicated, Ira, in 2018, this report found that older adults, people over the age of 50, contributed over $8.3 trillion worth of economic activity. Another way to think about it is that if people over the age of 50 were its own country, what we would find is that they would be the third largest country in the world, following the US and China from the standpoint of GDP. Amazing. Another way to think about it is that for every dollar spent in the United States in 2018, 56 cents of every dollar was spent by someone over the age of 50. 56 cents of every dollar. And we can look at this by sectors. We can look at this by products and services. And if you were to kind of fast forward, for your listeners who are on the call today, because I said earlier that aging is a good thing, millennials start turning 50 in 2031. Okay. And Gen Z starts turning 50 in 2042. So when you look at this report, we also do projections to take into account the growing demographics and the aging of the population. So what we find is the fact that by 2030, that 8.3 trillion increases to a little bit close to 13 trillion in terms of economic activity, which starts to account for millennials. So my millennials folks out there, you're part of this growing economy. And then by 2050, again, going back from 2018 of 8.3 trillion, it goes up to 28 trillion by 2050. So significant economic value to their economy, which only looks at the economic contributions. One of the things that we've also looked at with regards to this report is the fact that we know that many people over the age of 50 are either caregivers, they're caring for an older adult, a partner, a spouse. In some cases, they may be caring for a grandchild or a child. In addition to their caregiving, they are also volunteering, and they're also providing tremendous contributions in terms of charitable donations. And what this report finds is the fact that if you were to take that 8.3 trillion and then also account for the caregiving, the volunteerism, the charitable donations, that would be an additional $745 billion. So that 8.3 trillion goes up to about $9 trillion when you look at the totality of the contributions, both the economic and the societal benefits of this population. So the key message here is the fact that particularly for companies, for leaders, what is your longevity agenda? What is your aging agenda? How or will you ensure that you have an agenda, a strategy, frankly, to leverage, to account for, to co-create solutions with this growing sector of the population? Sure. Not thinking about this, not having a strategy for this population actually is a significant risk to the viability, the relevance, and the profitability of your organizations.
Yep. You know, moving a little further into that, because I've seen some interviews with you where you brought up COVID before in the last 18 months, and once again here was what we saw a lot in the news early on is once again the elderly, this negative stereotype of the elderly was this target, this sort of not resilient part of sort of the COVID puzzle. But we learned a lot of things along the way. One, that the elderly population is much more comfortable with technology than we thought. And that comes back to a lot of, okay, there's a lot of these tech businesses out there that need to sort of refocus and define, this market and what products and services they offer. And then there's another interesting thing in this interview where you talk about, and you brought up your grandmother earlier, intergenerationality, the generations that came together during the pandemic, and this whole process of reaching out to check on somebody. And once again, we help out our elders, but our elders also help us out. A very unique opportunity, sense of purpose. Talk a little bit about, once again, these how some of these negative stereotypes are just so wrong, and we learn more and more each day through groups and programs like yours at AARP about these entirely different ways to look at this population.
Well, I'm going to ask you a question, and I know this is probably going a little bit off script, but I think this is a good thing. What would you say are some of the key things you've learned from this pandemic?
Well, I've learned more about myself, that I'm more resilient than I thought I was, but also I love spending time at home with my kids, doing things with my family, and we have a very good support ecosystem in our family. I'll put it that way, including my wife's parents who are still alive. We functioned very well, beyond how I thought that things would go 18 months ago.
So the reason why I asked this question is because of the fact that one of the things that we've learned from this pandemic, and I love the fact that you used your family as a great example of this, because I will say to you, I think that's one of the key aha learnings that I've learned about my own family. Like, you know what? I actually like my kids.
Yes, shh, don't tell them that.
Don't tell them that. No, they're not. But no, in all seriousness, it's the fact that one of the things I think that this pandemic has taught us, or is teaching us, or we need to learn, is the fact that we are an interdependent society. Yep. Meaning the fact that what I do impacts you and what you do impacts me. And we need to move from this value of independence to a value of interdependence, because when we are interdependent, we realize that we really are more resilient as a society. And what I mean by that is the fact that this pandemic has literally illustrated that interdependency. Mm-hmm. And if we have not gotten that, it's going to drive us towards that conclusion because of the fact that we're interdependent. Mm-hmm. And to answer your question is the fact that clearly this pandemic has really brought to light a lot of the biases and attitudes that as a society we might have of each other. According to the World Health Organization, they indicated that nearly 50% of the population has ageist attitudes on an individual level. And we know from the work that we've done at AARP, particularly that the cost of age discrimination hampers economic growth, meaning the fact that it cost the United States in 2018 over $850 billion because of ageism. And what that means is that, what happens when people are not able to live to the fullest of their potential? We all suffer as a result. So the idea that what we've seen, particularly over the last 18 months as it relates to older adults, is that they're defying some of these stereotypes, and rightly so. Whether it's the TikTok dances, the FaceTimes, the Zoom calls, we're seeing a total counter to what people may have initially thought with regards to older adults and their use of technology or social media, or frankly, their ability to protest or be activists. We've seen this with regards to a lot of the racial reckoning that's occurred in the United States and frankly across the world, where you've actually seen older adults on the front lines right along with other generations, fighting for justice, fighting for equality, fighting for equity, protesting. And I know that we've also seen this with regards to the pandemic, where we've seen across generations the opportunity to check on each other, whether it's through our AARP Community Connections platform that has created and allowed people to create mutual aid groups where neighbors are checking on neighbors. Or you're actually seeing Meals on Wheels where you have college students who are going to drop off meals to seniors. Or as you indicated, the idea of our AARP Experience Corps, where you actually have older adults who are going into the inner cities, helping elementary kids learn how to read.
Yep.
Why is that critically important? Because studies show that you can actually predict who is going to go to jail based off third grade reading levels. So the opportunity to really give back, the opportunity to say, you know what, we are interdependent as a society, that we really need to put aside some of these stereotypes and labels and divisions and focus on what are our commonalities. And what that commonality is a sense of humanity, a sense that, you know, why do I need to label you without first getting to know who you are? And how are we as individuals, as societies, as organizations, helping to foster a more interconnected, more interdependent society?
Yeah, this theme of the intergenerationality, and it's been fascinating because I've had folks on from Donna Butts at Generation United. Juan Williams came on from Fox TV, and it's just it's a theme that we need to hear more, especially with all the problems that have been facing us in the last couple of years, and sort of the reconnecting, as you mentioned, the sense of humanity, bringing the different generations together. It's just such an important concept that we need to be talking more about.
Well, I think the other thing I would just add to that is that if you think about it, because I know there might be some listeners who say, oh my, I am now by its nature, I am a more optimistic person. I think it's important to have some level of optimism. But if you think about the vaccine, the opportunity, the speed in which there was a vaccine created to address and try to stifle and limit infections and deaths and hospitalizations, the speed in which that was created. That took tremendous collaboration. That took a clear sense of what is the problem we're trying to solve? What are the resources that we need in order to actually solve it? And how do we create the right framework in order to really accelerate the pace of change? So there had to be a level of vulnerability, there had to be a level of trust, there had to be a level of collaboration, a level of innovation, and as well as a level of pure acknowledgement of our interdependency across sectors. And that is, I think, a model for those elements are critically important for us to think about solving these other huge complex issues that we face. That is going to require some level of vulnerability. That is going to require some level of trust. That is going to require some level of collaboration and a framework for establishing that. What are the principles and the values that's going to accelerate the pace of innovation, that's going to accelerate the pace of change in order to enhance and increase the opportunity for people to live a longer, healthier, more productive life. That is not wishful thinking. That is just our reality.
John, I'd like to touch on some of those innovation topics with you at this point, because we've done a lot of episodes on some of these themes, and the first area I'd just like to get into with you. I did an episode about a few weeks ago, and it was on this concept of the University of the Third Age. And this specifically was at the American University in Beirut, Lebanon, where they've developed something called the University for Seniors. And it's once again, it's not just in this particular case, teaching my grandmother how to use Zoom or the smartphone, but in many cases these are can be advanced courses in quantum physics and other dynamics. These seniors want to stay intellectually challenged, socially engaged and both physically and mentally healthy. This was, as I said, in Lebanon. There was a group I talked to on the West Coast. It was called the Modern Elder Academy. Are you seeing in some of your research this concept of the university of the third age for our seniors that are going to now go to that sort of that next act springing up, both whether it be in the U.S. or in other countries around the world?
That is a great question. Let me tell you this. In fact, not only are we seeing it, but I do think that is part of the that's one of those disruptive forces in a very positive way. And what I mean by that is the fact that moving forward, the future is around upskilling and reskilling. It's around continuous learning. It's around lifelong learning. The notion that we had 3 elements over the life course, meaning the fact that you went to school, you worked for 30 plus years, and then you retired, is not the model in which we are in. We are seeing people live nonlinear lives, meaning the fact that it's no longer going to school for one period of time and then utilizing that skill set for a lifetime. It's actually going to school for a lifetime to be able to utilize skills over the course of your journey, meaning the fact that upskilling and reskilling is really the name of the game. We know that people are living longer, in many cases need to or want to continue learning. And one of the major initiatives that we've created is with the World Economic Forum and OECD called Living, Learning, and Earning Longer. Okay. And the idea here is the fact that longevity is a mega trend. And that in many cases, you have companies who are managing 4 to 5 generations at any given point in time. And in fact, we did a global survey of nearly 6,000 C-suite executives from OECD countries and found that 83% of those who responded valued a multi-generational workforce, but more than half did not include age as part of their diversity and equity inclusion policies. So how do we start to actually close that gap? Not only are we trying to close that gap and ensuring that age inclusivity is a common feature of the workforce, but we also know in talking to more than 54 global companies that reskilling and upskilling and lifelong learning are critical, given the trends that we're seeing, whether that is through digitalization, whether that's through AI and automation. What are the skills that are needed for the workforce of the future? And clearly the pandemic has accelerated that in significant ways. So we really have to start thinking about life stage and opportunities to partner with and engage around lifelong learning. I was talking to a college president from Stillman, which is a historically Black college university in Alabama. And she is a visionary in her own right, Dr. Warwick, and she has envisioned her campus becoming a multi-generational campus of the future. In fact, they're taking one of their oldest female dorms and translating that into a senior living community. So really to your point, Ira, about that third age. And in fact, I know that particularly in the US context, many universities and colleges are starting to face what they're referring to as an enrollment cliff. So even from a business standpoint, they are having to really re-examine their business models and think about how can they attract and support this growing demographic that values lifelong learning. The other thing I would quickly say is the fact that we have to think about some of these issues not in siloed, but really more integrated. And what I mean by that is the fact that we know that particularly in the US, there are 53 million family caregivers across the country. Of the 53 million, there's about 5 to 6 million that are college caregivers, meaning the fact that they're going to school while also providing care for a loved one. And similar to what we see in the employment context, we're seeing that in the academic context, meaning the fact that those who are in a caregiving role find it challenging to provide care and also remain academically being able to be high performers in an academic setting. So there's a lot of opportunities for us to not just think about lifelong learning in the third age within the university or college context, but also to think about how can we support individuals holistically who are grappling with not just their academic pursuits, but also their caregiving responsibilities, who are grappling with how do I remain relevant and upskill and reskill so I can be competitive in the marketplace and continue to give back. And one thing I have found, Ira, whether it's talking to a millennial or a Gen Z or talking to a boomer, everyone likes the idea of flexibility.
Yep.
Right? So there are certain policies and benefits that one can think about if you're a leader of a company that are frankly ageless. And we know from our own surveys at AARP that when you have mixed age teams, everybody benefits.
Absolutely. You used the word flexibility, and that got me thinking of another theme I wanted to ask you about. One of the topics that we've gotten into the past is the concept of aging in place. That, as I get older, I like my home, I'm comfortable here, I want to stay here. I don't want to ultimately go to an elder care facility. Technology is advancing at an amazing pace, and we've had guests talk about smart homes, and I guess this falls under the broader umbrella of so-called age tech, which is a really growing area. Talk a little bit about sort of your team at AARP. Are you researching the area of age tech, and what are some of the things that you see as important trends in a sense keeping me my in-laws and so forth happy, comfortable, aging in place in our homes?
So we've done a survey since the 1980s, and one of the questions has to do with people's preferences, particularly as they age. And overwhelmingly, since 1980, this has been a consistent finding. People overwhelmingly want to stay in their homes and communities for as long as possible. And if you think about it, your home, your community, is a combination of who you are, is those collective memories with family, as you talked about earlier, with your community, with your neighbors. The opportunity to create those life moments happens in your home and in your community. What we know is the fact that aging in place, and I like to use the term aging with options. Okay. And the reason why I use the term aging with options is the fact that one can, in theory, age in place, and because they lack the features that are needed, can be isolated and can become your own prisoner in your own home. Yep. And what I mean by that is the universal design features, the accommodations that would allow you to age with dignity, particularly as you get older. And I'll tell you a very quick story. When I used to work for the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, I had an opportunity to actually do a site visit to Richmond, Virginia, and meet a Medicaid beneficiary. And this was a gentleman at the time who was around the age of 42. And he was a police officer who unfortunately had a tragic incident that found himself in a hospital, that found himself paraplegic, that found himself transitioned from a hospital to a nursing home. And because of this federal program, we were able to transition him out of a nursing home. And some of the dollars from this federal program was used to retrofit a section of his brother's house. And so he was actually able to move in with his brother and his brother's family. Imagine this, age 42. And when we had an opportunity to meet him, Ira, and we were getting a sense as to, how could we improve this program? Because we thought that the core focus of this program was transitions, getting people out of their institution back into the home and community. That would be a win. And what we found in the course of talking to him and listening to him was that a personal care attendant would come to the house during the day and leave around 2. His family didn't come home until about 6:30. So from 2 to 6:30, he was pretty much isolated. He wanted to get involved in his community, whether it's to go to the library, whether it's to go grab some coffee, or in some cases to go visit his buddies at the police station, but could not. And the reason why he could not was because of the fact that he lived in a cul-de-sac, and public transit only came into the entryway of the neighborhood. So imagine being able to see public transit, but not get to it or get on it. So the moral of the story here is the fact that he was aging in place, but what we had really done was transition him from one institution to another. And that transition was because of the fact that he was isolated for most of the day. And he was not integrated in the community, even though he wanted to be. And so as we think about the opportunities to be able to age in place or to age with options, what we need to also think about is not just what are the features of the home, but also what are the features of the community and the neighborhood in which you live, so you have access to the services and supports that you need in order to be integrated in the community in a way that you desire. So when we think about the universal design features, when we think about the opportunities to ensure that there is a bedroom on the first floor, or that the hallway is wide enough, or that there's actually a ramp to get up to the main floor, or any of the other features that are needed, that's critically important. But we also have to take it a step further to say, you know, how integrated are you in the community to the extent to which you want to be? Because what we should not want is to transition one person from one setting to another, and not realize that that person's quality of life has not improved because they are not being able to connect with their community surroundings.
And on those lines, you just got me thinking about the, you know, the WHO, sort of the Healthy Cities, Decade of Healthy Aging program. How are you rating, based on your research, how are we doing as a country? Are there specific hotspots in the United States where we're doing better in terms of, you know, not just the home setting, but, you know, we have the right access points and the safety and so forth, that anything that you could spotlight on the Healthy Cities front per the United States?
No, absolutely. So this refers to the age-friendly communities. And also age-friendly states and communities. And AARP has been a major partner, in fact, working with many communities across the country. We're at over 400 communities that has been designated as age-friendly. And this really gets into a lot of the things that we're talking about, even with the story in terms of what I just shared with you, in terms of what are the features, what are the domains that are necessary for your neighborhood to be livable, to be age-friendly. That gets into housing options, transportation options, that gets into health options, that gets into the whole idea of civic engagement, economic opportunity, clearly thinking about the features in terms of how safe is the community. We know that so much of our overall health and well-being is connected to where we live, eat, play, work, and pray. So how are we ensuring that there's a blueprint in place that would allow individuals to do that? So as an organization, AARP has been engaged with more than 400 communities across the United States to really identify what are those promising practices, what are those case studies, to create a mechanism where there's information, learnings happening across the communities to ensure that those who we are trying to help are part of the process of co-creating those solutions, which is, I think, is a key feature of the Age-Friendly Communities Network, is that this actually takes into account the input, the insights, and the lived experiences of older adults and the creation of that blueprint so that a community can be age-friendly. In addition to that, we know that particularly given the devastation that we've seen over the pandemic, one of the things that AARP has done for the last couple of years is what we refer to as the AARP Community Grant Challenge. And this is an opportunity where we award communities resources for what could potentially be very short-term projects that can increase the livability of a community, whether that is complete streets, whether that is modifications to a park, or whether that is ensuring that individuals have opportunities towards greater access to healthcare. And we're very fortunate to do that. In addition, Ira, I will say that when we talk about parks, that we have something called the fitness parks.
Okay.
Where AARP has open parks in several states across the country that are multi-generational, intergenerational in nature. And again, these are opportunities to address not just the health, but also the wealth of the community.
Mm-hmm. Really, really fascinating. It's just a amazing portfolio that the AARP is involved in nowadays. John, while I have you, I wanted to ask about one more innovation topic, and this one I want to get into the theme of longevity biotechnology, and this is an area that maybe unlike age tech or elder care, not as popular yet, a little more embryonic, but I'm talking about sort of the world of my former industry, the pharmaceutical biotech, where they're trying to, in essence, make 90 the new 50, not to make you immortal, not to make you live 1,000 years, but to basically have an 80 and 90-year-old at some point through biologic methods, pharmaceutical methods, have a much longer health span where we don't have the diseases of older age kick in. One of the things that I always get when I have those conversations is sort of the lamentation that there isn't as much public awareness of the area as some of these others. I've always said, well, it's because you're not focusing on the right population. A lot of the advocacy around it are 20-year-olds and so forth. Like, you got to get people that are a little more interested in that are have a little more skin in the game when it comes to getting up in age. Any interesting insights through your thought leadership on this particular space, pros or cons, anything you'd like to say about what you see in researching longevity biotechnology development?
Well, there are a couple of things I would just quickly say is the fact that we know that in some of the high-performing countries, that a child born today has more than a 50% chance of living beyond 104. And what we also know is the fact that longevity is not evenly distributed across populations.
Yep.
And COVID-19 has actually demonstrated that quite starkly, some of the inequities.
Yep.
So as we are having these conversations and as we're thinking about solutions that could potentially increase health span, the question becomes who's benefiting and who is not.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the issue of equity needs to be a core focus of some of these conversations and some of these strategies. Because again, if there are variations in terms of the benefits and the allocations of some of these products, then the question becomes, as a society, are we raising all boats?
Got it.
And if we're not, are we as a society collectively benefiting as a result of some of these interventions? And I think that is something that we need to be very intentional about in terms of, again, going beyond this notion of independence to really thinking about the interdependency of our society as a key marker of what success should be. And then finally, what I would say is this is the fact that part of what we've done as a team over the course of the last couple of years is really had conversations with folks across the country around this idea of living to 100. And what we need to think and what we've heard from many, many people is the fact that it really depends. It depends on their quality of life. It depends on the ability to be able to finance and support that longer life. It depends on the connections to their communities and to their families. So as we think about the potential to expand health span, we also need to think about some of these other pillars that makes life so worth living.
Appreciate the input on that one. Jean, coming back to you now, we started off our discussion earlier with you and your grandmother back in Haiti, obviously a major influence on the early days of your life. You've had an amazing career. You've no doubt met many fascinating people in industry, in nonprofit, in government, in academia. Take the floor back, if you would, and just take some time to shout out to any mentors, influencers, other important people along the way that have been really there with you and kept you on this path, continuing to champion a world of people living longer, healthier, more productive lives.
I will tell you that I am a product of a village. When I rarely do this, but when I step back and reflect on the tremendous blessings in my life, my family, my friends, my colleagues, and the enormous opportunities that I've been given, I am extremely humbled and extremely grateful for the many people who have, over the years, at different points in time, stopped and said, you know what, I want to invest in you, or I see something in you that I didn't necessarily see in myself. I am extremely grateful for my mentors at AARP, whether that is Scott Frisch, who is the Chief Operating Officer for the organization, or our CEO, Joanne Jenkins, who's just absolutely an amazing visionary, or the many colleagues who have stopped to give me some encouragement along the way, or my colleagues in the field of health or long-term care and aging. I do not take it lightly. I also am extremely grateful for the many people who have shared their lived experiences with me, because at the end of the day, that is what it's about. It's about impact. It's about the opportunity to benefit and help fulfill the dreams of others. So whether it's the many people in the retirement communities who would sit down and talk to me about their life stories, what they've learned over the years, and I've been a benefactor of that. Or my family, I come from a very large family, who would pull me back into the fold, if you will, when I thought I knew more than I did growing up. But, I think that when you think about it, we are all products of all of those individuals in our life's journey who has touched us in some way, where we've learned something from them, either directly or indirectly. And I am grateful that I've been observant enough to be able to sit at the feet of some very inspirational people. I could not be where I am today without that. And I think that there's two quotes that I really live by. One is by Brian Stevenson, where he talks about, in order to be a very effective problem solver, you have to get close to the problem. This issue of proximity. And that this idea that we have broken systems because we are broken people. But there's a sense of grace and there's a sense of power when we realize our brokenness as a sense of humanity. And it is that quote, Ira, that stays with me day in, day out. The other one is the fact that it's not about the opportunity to be in rooms with big people. It's the opportunity to be able to sit next to those who are broken and who are not, quote unquote, big people, where you learn the most. So for me, the shout out is for all of those residents who was like, why? There was this resident that I will never forget, because I was in the retirement home literally all weekend. I would work breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And in between those shifts, I would sit outside with the residents. I kid you not. I was there. You would have thought that I was a resident as much as long as to the point that one of the residents was called me Mashugana. So she would come in.
What that means.
Right?
Yep.
But I learned so much. They didn't have titles at that,
Right.
They weren't people of power influence, but they were people of power and influence. If that makes sense.
Yep.
So for me, it's a long way of saying that I am a product of a village that runs the gamut, whether it's people of influence and power in terms of how people define or how society define what power and influence is, or whether it's the person right next door, or the person I bump into in the street, or the person I hear about their story.
Mm-hmm.
And I say to myself, what can I do to the extent to which I can be used to provide some meaning and support to help solve this potential challenge?
It's a beautiful message. A really beautiful message, and it's a fascinating story and journey that you've been on, and I really look forward to continue. I've been following you for several years now. It's been very interesting because watching your talks, reading when you're in the press, and really wishing you the best with all this, because you have so much on your plate, and it's going to be a very interesting next few decades on this front. So really all the best, and for everybody that's going to be watching this particular episode on our YouTube channel or listening on the various podcasts. Once again, you've been listening to Dr. Jean Accius, Senior Vice President, AARP, Global Thought Leadership. Jean, once again, I want to take time to thank you for taking time out of your schedule to come talk to us. Thanks for everything you're involved in. As we say on our show, thanks for helping to create the better tomorrow. A very inspiring story.
Thank you.